That's not good. It's absolutely tearing like paper. These lines are crispy. Okay, now that we got the saw on the bench, taking a look at it here, it doesn't look so bad. When I look here at the primer bulb, I can see that it's cracked. Usually this is an indication that the fuel system has more issues than just a primer bulb, probably hard gas lines, etc. Let's take the top off and give it a look. Let's get this plug out and do a compression test. Plug looks pretty good, little carbon on it, nothing out of the norm. Alright, let's give it a pull. Oh, that's not good. Either we have an internal issue with an engine or a starter issue. So let's take the starter off and take a look and see what we can see. Okay, now that we got the starter off, I can see the rope and the rotor look good, so that means the problem lies with our engine here, and this flywheel is not turning by hand, so I am going to put a ratchet on it and try to see if I can break it free. And yep, it just feels like gunk is in the cylinder. Wow, I feel like we dodged a bullet there. I am going to lubricate these pawls, make sure they actuate properly. Yep, that one feels great, and so does that one. Now let's put the starter back on and we're going to do a compression test. When I'm doing a compression check on a chainsaw, I like to pull the rope at least a good solid 10 times to get a proper reading on the gauge here, and let's see what we've got. We're over 120 psi, which is good. Okay, now let's turn our attention to the fuel system. You can see the primer here is bad, so let's take the air filter off and look further. Okay, remember what I said about a primer bulb indicating more issues with the fuel system? As you can see here, yep, these lines are crispy. Let's remove the air intake carburetor mount. I like to take the throttle linkage off before I remove the last bolt from the air intake carburetor mount. There's the linkage and it's off, and now let's remove the last bolt. Okay, now let's pry the rubber mounts off the air intake carburetor mount, and there we go. Those are free, and let's unclip the choke from the mount itself. Now we can really see the condition of this fuel system. Yes, these lines are terrible, and on this side these lines are really terrible as well, and the grommets. All this is going to need to be replaced. Okay, now let's get the carburetor off. Okay, let's get this carburetor open and see what we've got. A lot of junk in there. This almost smells like a varnish. Very, very bad gasoline. Now let's get the other side off. Sometimes you will need to pry this side of the carburetor off with a small screwdriver. It gets stuck, as it is in this case here. Just give it a gentle pry like that and it'll come right off. Now this gasket is really stuck, feels really hard. Okay, yes, it's crispy like the gas lines. Yep, breaking off there. So it's supposed to be pliable. This is what a bad diaphragm looks like in a carburetor. That is absolutely tearing like paper. Okay, so yep, it's going to tear. A lot of times these will tear, and you will need to get a small screwdriver or something handy and actually scrape this off. Okay, now we're down to the inlet needle. We're going to need to take this out, and let's remove this set screw here. Dump everything out on the table. There we go. Sometimes the stuff will stick. Spring is stuck there. Let me pull that out. Okay, and the needle is stuck, and I'm going to need to gently pry up on the needle with this small flathead screwdriver. There we go. It is out. Oh, there's one thing I almost forgot. I forgot to take out the screen here, so let's pry that out. All right, let's get it in the bath. Okay, now time to replace these gas lines and grommets. Got to pry up on the grommets like this. These are coming apart. They're not supposed to do that, so getting those off, and you can really feel and see how this gas line is not pliable at all. So remove that from the primer bulb and let's get this out of here. Just like that. And this line actually has the filter on the other side, so we're going to need to pull that from inside the tank. Okay, let's get into the tank here and get this fuel filter out. It's actually easier if you remove the gas cap like this and have some long forceps to reach in and just pull it out. Now let's get new grommets into the fuel tank. I like to lube them like this. Makes it easier to go in, line it up with a hole. I always start with the back one and press down. You kind of have to work with it, but it will go in like that and press down. Sometimes they can give you some trouble, but if you work with it, it will go in. A small screwdriver or something to kind of press on the edges, and it will help it to go into the tank and seat properly. And now to replace the primer, we're going to pry the tabs like this and pull the old one out, the old one back in the same way. Here is the new primer, and you can see the two together, how big a difference there is. So new one goes in, longer stem on top, press it in, it will click and you will feel it. Now let's get new fuel lines in the saw, press it in like this, and this back line actually routes under the manifold like this. And now the front line, this is actually the line that has the fuel filter on it, so I'm going to press this into the tank here and open the tank itself and use some long forceps and pull it through. I am going to clip off the angle that helped me press it into the tank right here, square, to install the new filter. Sometimes this can be a little bit difficult, but if you twist it, it will go on. Okay, now it's time to get the carburetor out of the sonic cleaner. If you're using a heated one, be careful because these can be warm. Let's get it dried off with some compressed air here. Make sure you blow in all the holes on the carburetor. Get it good and dry. Okay, now that we've got the carburetor clean and dry, it is time to rebuild it with a new kit. I always start with what I call side one. I'm going to replace this diaphragm first. Inlet needle, just like this. The spring in its spot here, pinky out, or it will not go in, just like that. And for the metering arm, let's place that in its spot as well. Again, pinky out, so crucial. When placing the metering arm in the carburetor, make sure it goes under the head of the needle, or you will have issues. It will not function properly without doing this. But you'll know when you got it. Now we need to put the set screw to hold it all in place. Here is an up-close view of the needle inlet metering area, and it should function just like this. You can test it. And now let's replace the gasket on the carburetor. Just follow the tabs at the top. It'll line up for you just like this and press down. Now, let's put the diaphragm on. Again, the same tab openings at the top. Just line those up. It will guide you and press it down just like this. Reinstall the cover using the 4 screws that we removed before. Just line it up and put your screws in just like this. Super simple. Turning our attention to the other side of the carburetor, let's install the screen filter just like this. Press it in with your thumb, and the best tool I have noticed to actually push these down all the way is a pencil eraser just like this. Now let's install the cover. Just make sure you hold everything in place like this and use the 1 screw. Snug this up, and this side is now on. Now that we have the carburetor cleaned and rebuilt, let's get it back on the saw and hook up all the fuel lines to the primer bulb and the carburetor itself like this. Make sure they're pressed on far enough. Okay, now let's install the air and filter carburetor mount back on the saw. Go into the rubber grommet on the far side first, and then clip the choke in like this, and then the rubber grommet closest to you like this. Let's reinstall the 4 bolts into the carburetor. Long ones on the bottom, short ones on the top, just like this. Now let's install a new spark plug in the saw. Thread it in by hand and then use a wrench to get it tight. Not too tight, just snug it up just like that. Now the boot. I am going to remove the bar and the chain off the saw before I test start it. So let's get this off right now. Okay, let's reinstall the fuel cap and fill the saw with fuel. Retighten the cap. And now let's test the primer. If it's hooked up correctly, it will fill with gasoline. If not, then you know you have the lines backwards. I almost forgot a crucial step. To reinstall the throttle linkage, slide it into the back part of the handle first. It makes it easier, and then onto the carburetor slot just like that. And there you go, and give it a test, and this one's working correctly. And now let's test start the saw. Give it a prime and choke, and alright. And let's set the idle down just a little.